Hi, everyone. I'm Tanvi. I'm one of the other journalism fellows at Bay Nature with Jillian. Yes, and I'm going to change the slide. I'm really excited to introduce our last awardee of the evening, Avroh Shah. Avroh is a sophomore right now at Palo Alto High School, and it's impossible to summarize everything he's done since he started fighting for nature in elementary school, so I'm not going to give you his resume. But from lawsuits to cleanups to campaigns to yoga, he's done a lot. Over the hours I've had the privilege of spending with Avroh, what I've learned the most from is the way he approaches his work. I got to spend some time walking in the Baylands with him, and I was impressed by the fact he'd seen a ridgeways rail there, which every birder knows is a hugely rare sighting, so very exciting. But I also took a lot away from just seeing the way he looked at the Baylands. He spent the last year fighting to protect those unique wetlands from the expansion plans of the Palo Alto airport, and walking with them, I saw how much Avroh loves the nature there and the ways he saw it, but I also saw how much more he recognized about the place, from the way he empathized with the pilots who flew out of the airport, the way he thought about how the communities who live nearby were impacted by those pilots, from the way he saw why the preserve mattered to everyone who worked and played there. He saw the complex systems that bound everything together with such clarity, recognized who it impacted, and then saw where he could work to change it. What exactly will happen next with the Baylands isn't clear yet, and I asked Avroh if he's going to take a break after they wait to see what will happen. He told me no, and he told me about a pipeline that's happening in Southern California and how he's thinking about getting involved in advocacy around that. High school wasn't very long ago for me, and I know most students in high school are very concerned about what's going to happen to them and what's going to happen, where they're going to go to college and what they're going to do. But Avroh's laser focused on what will happen to everything around him, whether human or plant or animal, in increasingly chaotic climate futures. I think everyone here can recognize that caring about nature can often get pretty lonely. Not everyone gets excited about a bird or a plant. Not everyone thinks about climate change all the time. And there's a lot of pressure on young people to be every single solution. But Avroh has a talent for seeing what brings people together, even if it's not immediately obvious. He meets people where they're at and finds those points of connection. Even when he's talking with a pilot who may not disagree with him on a lot of things, both of them care about what happens to their families in the future, right? He listens, and then he figures out what to do next. So yeah, Avroh's work is impressive, but I'm even more excited to see what he does next. And because of that, I'm really excited to present this year's Young Leader Award to Avroh Shah, which comes with a $500 grant for professional development, supported this year by Friends of Edgewood Natural Preserve. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my fellow tree huggers, nature lovers, and environmentalists. I would like to tell you all a story today, a story of how I have come to realize that when something you love becomes threatened, your fight to protect it comes not as a choice, but rather as an instinct. That when what you love is threatened, you put aside your personal reluctancies and inhibitions to speak up for what you know to be true and right. That's the story of why I am in front of you all today, because I can say with an absolute certainty that I have learned that we cannot take for granted the natural world that surrounds us. You see, I'm the son of immigrants who grew up in the polluted cities of India with next to no access to nature. But when my parents first came to America, they were taken aback by the great abundance of towering redwood trees and breathtaking waterfalls, and they strive to share what they never had with their children, with me. And so I've had the great fortune of having parents who would drag me kicking and screaming onto long and destinationless hikes. And while I may have not enjoyed the hiking aspect at that age, I've always found immense value and appreciation for the beauty of the outdoors And these days, I can proudly say that I find myself going on these same hikes, but this time out of my own volition. But when I was just 6 or 7, I learned from my older sister that these beautiful places that I felt so connected to were under attack by a major crisis that threatened not only our environment, but also our livelihoods, our futures, and our planet. And that crisis is none other than the climate crisis. But you would be ignorant not to consider that while, yes, the direct effects of climate change are devastating enough by themselves, the ability of climate change to catalyze and exacerbate pre-existing environmental and human crises is perhaps a more pressing danger. From immigration, where it's estimated that there will be 1.2 billion climate-linked refugees by 2050, to the extinction crisis, where plants and animals are dying off at a faster rate than the dinosaurs were, with one species extinct every 20 minutes. And let me tell you that once these animals, plants, and ecosystems are gone, they are gone forever. And they are not coming back, especially if we don't speak up. And if we don't learn to speak up, bad people will continue to destroy and pillage and plunder this planet for her resources to sell for so-called profits, with no cognizance of their wide wake of destruction and no accountability for the losses that the world is forced to endure. If we don't speak up, our complacency and indifference will continue to be exploited by those who only seek to enrich themselves off of widespread suffering. But you see, that's where people like me and people like you learn to come in, to say no, to say that there is no price they can put on this planet, and to say that we won't let them ravage the treasure of the air that we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we eat, and the world that we live in. For the last 8 years, half of my life now, I have dedicated myself to the conservation, protection, and stewardship of our planet. I am what people call a climate justice and environmental activist, but I hate those descriptions. Because when did we decide that supporting a life-sustaining planet become activism? When did wanting to give our children a future equal or greater in potential than the one that we have now become activism? When did saying that we shouldn't be destroying the planet, our only home, for the sake of enriching a few select people, become activism? Tackling climate change isn't radical, it's just common sense. But I must admit that I have entered this fight not through the perspective of human rights as many do now, but rather through an environmental lens. Because at a young age, I saw the devastation of the California droughts and knew that unless we do something about climate change, natural disasters would continue to be exacerbated at an exponential rate. And given the climate-intensified disasters that we see around the world these days, from the devastating LA fires to Hurricane Helene, it's overwhelmingly evident that climate change is no longer an issue of tomorrow, but rather an issue of today. And given how these climate-intensified disasters cost the global economy $38 trillion in 2024, it's incredibly concerning that some of our greatest fears of climate catastrophe have come true, while people attempt to argue that climate change and climate action is bad for the economy. But I have not and I will never give up, because to me that's an act of cowardice, and that's something that I cannot condone nor respect. So I have fought for my generation's right to an equal future and gone head-to-head with 2 presidential administrations in the courts as a plaintiff in the federal climate justice lawsuit Genesis versus EPA, fighting for our basic right to a life-sustaining climate. I have met with congressmen and senators on sunny days in Capital DC, compelling them to support specific and feasible solutions to avoid the clouds of climate catastrophe lurking on the horizon, and I have persuaded school boards and city council members to support effective climate solutions at the most local levels of governance. I have fought in solidarity against dirty pipeline expansions that violate treaties with indigenous nations, and I have campaigned to raise awareness on the connection between the big banks and the fossil fuel industry. I've spoken in front of thousands at schools, venues, and conferences across the world, seeking to rally support for climate action, as I hope to do with you all here today. And I know that we can win, even in the light of seemingly insurmountable challenges, because history tells us we can, but so does my experience. This past summer, in the town that I live in, the Federal Aviation Administration, which is under the thumb of corporate lobbyists, unfortunately, instructed the Paul Walter Airport, the 19th most lead-intensive airport in the nation, to make renovations that would include plans to expand into the adjacent wetlands preserve to accommodate larger, louder, and more lead-intensive aircrafts. I must note that 90% of the bay's wetlands have been developed on or severely degraded as a result of human activity. But in Palo Alto, because of the hard work of courageous leaders in the 1960s who stood up for outdoor spaces in a time when development was an unfortunate norm of our civilization, we have preserved our share of the wetlands. And so when I learned that our environment was under attack, more so in my backyard, the only choice I had was to speak up. And working alongside regular folks, from restaurant owners to neighbors to bird watchers and so many more, I successfully brought together a diverse coalition that stretched across communities and causes, across political divides and ideological barriers, with us all agreeing that we could not afford to expand the footprint of this airport. So we mobilized thousands to take action, online and in person, to sign petitions and write letters. But as strong as our campaign was, I was worried. I had become, unfortunately, accustomed to losing. And I had seen countless examples, like in San Carlos, where a few years ago, despite a strong community-backed campaign, local leaders fell prey to the influence of corporate lobbying and failed to implement a strong and sensible curfew plan to the local airport. So I worked hard because I knew we could not afford a loss. And on September 16th, 2024, with hundreds of us packed tightly into City Hall, including some of the former council members who fought to protect the Baylands in the 60s, we demanded that the Baylands be left untouched. And the City Council, swaying heavily in our favor, effectively shut down the special interests' hope for expansion on that night. But it was not necessarily a win, but rather a step in the right direction. Until just a few weeks ago, where the City of Palo Alto omitted an airport expansion from their 2025 agenda, which is the first time I was really happy to see that win. That means that the Baylands are safe for now because of regular people who came together and spoke up for what they all treasured, valued, and loved. But let me tell you that for regular people like you and me, this kind of work is far from easy. And more often than not, when fighting for something that you love, you might find yourself pushing against a brick wall. That no matter how hard you try, it refuses to budge. I am someone who has lost 10 times more than I have won, but if there is one thing that I hope to leave with you all today, it's that when we find ourselves fighting what feels like a pointless fight, when we find ourselves pushing against that brick wall, know that if together we push hard enough, we may just leave an indentation. But in doing so, we set an example for posterity and show the world that we will never be complacent. We set the stage for future generations to take up the torch of environmentalism. And that, my fellow environmentalists, will have to be enough. Thank you.